lowest carbon energy in Pakistan, and this will provide much political momentum and commercial opportunity for solar energy cooperation between China and Pakistan, and we are quite excited about it. So back to this study, that as you can see, the title of the study is Unlocking the Economic Potential of Rooftop Solar PV in Pakistan. And actually this study builds on, let me put this on this mode. Yeah, so actually this is built on some of our previous surveys where we came to know that presently the concentration of rooftop solar is skewed toward certain feeders and towards certain sections of society. For instance, from our previous surveys, we came to know that most of the people who have 80% of the respondents who have installed solar systems in the under the net metering regulations indicated that they are living quite comfortably on their incomes. And then we also surveyed those people who have not yet, we call them non-prosumers, those who have not yet adopted solar PV. And we came to know that 68% of the end users in Pakistan are already relying on some kind of alternative backup energy systems, mostly UPS or diesel and gas generators. And 50% of these people indicated that at some point they seriously considered adoption of solar PV, but 80% out of them said that 84% stated that the high cost of technology was a key barrier, and 76% said that the difficulties in availing finance for installing the system was hindering them to adopt solar PV system. So based on these findings, we wanted to know that on one hand, where there are such strong demand forces in Pakistan for solar energy, and then there are uh, so many schemes. Let me show you the next slide. So there are three types of financing presently available in Pakistan, which people could avail uh, to install the solar systems. And first of all, you can avail finance under regular financing. Then there are some independent schemes by banks, and then there is a specifically tailored scheme of State Bank to promote renewable energy, and this scheme was rolled out in 2016. And you can see that this scheme is presently providing finance under three different categories, and category 2 is uh, because we were looking at the domestic sector, so category 2 is targeted toward those potential adopters who would like to install a system less than 1 megawatt. So uh, under 6% interest rate, which is quite concessionary, you can avail this finance under the scheme. And the maximum tenure period that you could avail is quite long, that is 10 years. And then 400 million rupees could be allocated to a single borrower under the scheme. However, now I am jumping to the findings of our study. We could see that the solar financing is still in its infancy, because our study findings indicate, as you can see from the first graph, that only it has gained traction only recently. Uh, Even presently, as per our findings, only 13 banks are extending finance under the State Bank scheme. And out of these 13%, the year-wise initiation of the scheme is showcased in the first graph here. And in the second graph, you can see the number of solar products financed so far. So 23% of these 13 banks, they stated that they have not financed a single case so far, because they are still in the process of designing their SOPs, and or either they have newly adopted the scheme. And then 54% indicated that they have so far financed less than 10 solar PV products, and 23% indicated that they have financed more than 10 PV products. And alongside this statistic, we also came to know that banks have distanced themselves from uh, battery financing and off-grid financing. For instance, 31% said that they don't finance batteries, 21% said that they don't finance systems in the off-grid sector. So, uh, and why are majority banks wary about small-scale solar lending? So, our interviews with these banks indicated that presently a key concern related to solar financing is the financial risks in case of default by customers. So compared to other products such as vehicles or the largest concern in the case of solar products is the absence of secondary market for used solar systems. So according to the banks, even if someone defaults and they have some kind of collateral as a backup, still liquidating this collateral is quite high. As here it is stated that the resale value of the solar product is not so concrete. So this is one of the primary impediment that they are facing. And so based on these concerns, banks have designed, they were quite frank in their interactions with us, and they told us that they have designed quite restrictive criterions for solar financing because their ultimate concern is to minimize any kind of risks that potentially could be faced. And so extensive paperwork is carried out at the time of screening of applicants. Another challenge exacerbating the hesitation to engage in the market was indicated to be the low return on the small scale systems and high transaction cost of administrative work. Now, again, as you could see that under the state bank finance scheme, out of the 6% interest rate, 4% is the share of the commercial banks, whereas 2% is the share of the state bank. So according to the in majority interviews, we came to know that the return on the, especially on small scale systems, is so low that compared to the administrative cost that they have to bear for processing the applications, they rather prefer not to uh, entertain cases for smaller systems. And then finally, according to few interviews, both the demand and return for solar financing is quite low, and they have limited human resource staff. So they prefer to engage their staff in those schemes where, or in those products where the demand is quite high and where the return is also high for the banks and secure. And then if we, as I mentioned earlier, that the banks have designed their the salient features for advancing loans such that it eliminates once again majority of potential adopters. For instance, here in the first graph, you could see the variation of loan by type of security. So a solar system could either be unsecure, any loan could either be unsecure or it could be secured by the system itself, or there is a third option that it could be secured by real estate or some kind of other concrete documents. So a majority banks require the solar loans to be backed by real estate, and as you can see, 46% of the interviewees indicated that they need some kind of uh, real estate as a collateral for advancing the loans, and then 23% said that they simply take the system as a collateral, and 31% said that these decisions are decided depending on the cases that they have. So if someone has an attractive overall scoreboard or profile, then they would uh, advance the loan to them without any security, and otherwise they would need a proper collateral to support the loan with. And the tenor of financing again is a key player because if the longer the tenor is, it determines the what you call it, the smaller is the average monthly payment that a borrower has to make. So a shorter tenor increases the amount of each periodic payment, whereas a longer tenure is associated with reduced monthly payments, which overall broadens its scope and terms of affordability for a much larger section of society. So 46% of the banks presently have a tenure period of 10 years. This is the maximum tenure period. 36% said that they are at the maximum tenure for these loans is 5 years, and 80% of the respondents said that it is 7 years. And then in addition to these loan terms, there is many banks have also highlighted additional eligibility criterions for availing finance under the scheme, and we have elaborated this in our report based on the pamphlets that they have published. And you can see that, for instance, some banks are advancing loans in some specific cities, and then there are other kind of such benchmarks that have been set to restrict the scope of financing. And now the second part of our study, we basically wanted to explore that why, despite huge demand for solar systems in Pakistan, Opex business models have failed to emerge. And my colleague Talha carried out the interviews from solar vendors to gauge their views on the hurdles and impediments facing Opex models. Is here with me. Talha, if you could please jump in. And
Thank you, Naila. Assalamu alaikum and good afternoon, everyone. I am Talha Rashid. In this part of presentation, I will discuss the power purchase agreement and barriers in the Opex business model at rooftop level. As it is clear by its name, Opex or operating business model is a design in which developers own the solar system and operate it and maintain it. While on the other hand, consumer only have to pay for electricity generated. Opex business model have two types. First one is the power purchase agreement, and the second one is the rooftop leasing model. As per our study, not even a single solar company is using Opex business model at rooftop level due to many barriers and lack of awareness. In order to get the data set for my project, I contacted 109 solar companies so that I can understand the business model in Pakistan and find the barriers in the Opex business model, as well as barrier and constraints and challenges in the net metering and State Bank of Pakistan's renewable energy financing scheme. Out of these 109 solar companies, 62 companies were from V2 category of ADB and 47 companies are from V1 category of ADB. And out of these 109 solar companies, we got response from only 30 solar vendors. So the sample size for our study would be the 30 interviews. For interviews, we contacted technical heads of the solar companies, and in the absence of these technical heads, we contact different branches of this company in different cities. By our finding, by our study, we find four major type of categories of barriers in Opex business model. First one is the legal constraint, which is the most important one. And the second one is the operational barriers. Third one is the financial risk. And fourth one is the conflict resolving. In legal constraint, a majority of solar vendors mentioned that they will have to face the legal binding constraint for participation in net metering in the case of Opex business model at domestic level. And some solar vendors mentioned that there is the absence of enabling regulations in off-grid sector for Opex business model. Moving on toward operational barriers, 17% solar vendor mentioned that they will have to face the logistic related challenges. As we know that in the Opex business model, the ownership and operation and maintenance of the solar system is at the end of the solar vendor. So at scatter site, they will have to allocate extra logistic resources, which is not feasible for them. 37% of solar companies mentioned that at domestic level, the energy yield. So the bill collection of these scatter site will also be difficult for them. They also mentioned that they will have to face the difficulties in the outreach of their end users. And third one is the financial risk. In financial risk, 67% solar vendors mentioned that they will have to face the default risk of their client. What will happen if their client defaults, and they will have to face the loss, and this loss will eat up the profit of 2 or more solar systems. And 37% solar vendor mentioned that at domestic level, energy yield of the solar system will be low, so the payback period will increase. And some solar vendors mentioned that they will have to face the tariff uncertainties in net metering, and they would be unable to get the benefit of net metering due to load shedding in the case of Opex business model. And 27% solar vendors mentioned that their clients have to face difficulties in assessing and acquiring the capital and finance from the banks. Now moving on toward a conflict resolving body. Currently in Pakistan, there is not even a single conflict resolving body for Opex business model at the domestic level. So some solar vendors mentioned that there should be a conflict resolving body so that they can manage their uh, uh, problems of system damage. And similarly, in the case of the default, this conflict resolving body should also cater the risk of the default. Thank you very much. That's all from my side.
Thank you so much, Salah. Thank you so much, Naila, for your presentations. Again, this is the example of why we, this load shedding and everything. This is a good example of why we need more solar PV potential at a domestic level as well. And again, before I move to the panel discussion, I guess this is a very timely study by Naila and the team, because it becomes all the more important in the given prevalent energy outlook of Pakistan as well. There is this market of, off-grid electrification. There is this market of solar rooftop. We have the resource, and you identify some very serious, challenges to the journal uptake as well. It's not like perhaps we're not lacking in terms of policy, we're not lacking in terms of ambition. The policy is there, the ambition is there, the resources there, but then again, there are these little hurdles that need to be overcome with regards to, greater adoption of RE when it comes to solar PV. So again, thank you so much for the presentation. I'd like to move on to the panel discussion now. We have 4 panelists. I'd like to start with Mr. Akil Jaffrey. Mr. Jaffrey, if you could please switch on your video. Mr. Jaffrey currently works as the Director Policy at Alternative Development Energy Board, ADB. He has been serving in ADB since 2003. His focused areas of serving are power policy, project coordination, project appraisal, and project implementation. Always a pleasure to have you here with us. Thank you so much, Jaffrey sir, for joining us. Again, like Naila mentioned, there is this policy, and then again, ADB has been quite active on that front as well, with regards to net metering and its greater adoption as well. But then again, we feel like there is what remains missing is the enabling environment with regards to this, right? So it is not only from the consumer end. Banks have some valid arguments with regards to this as well. How do we manage our risk? How do we ensure there is no, secondary market for solar panels? There are these general challenges for the banking sector as well. There are these challenges for the solar companies as well when it comes to, increasing the adoption of solar PV in households. So how does ADB look at all of this? And you personally, how do you see all of these challenges playing in? And what are some of the ways that they can be overcome? Thank you so much.
Thank you, Mustafa. First of all, thank you for inviting me to this launch of the report. I think, as you mentioned, that it is the report is coming at a very proper time, and when we are in the process of promoting the distributed generation apart from the large scale projects, wind and solar projects, which the government has been focusing on for the last 10 years or so. As you mentioned, that the ARE policy not has a primary focus on the development of large-scale projects based on ARE resources, but it also outlines the significance of distributed generation. And for that reason, it also envisages the simplification of the regulatory regime in order to promote distributed generation. You rightly mentioned, and the report rightly highlights that there still are some impediments when it comes to deployment of solar, especially the availability of financing. But I think one of the most important aspects has been the awareness amongst the general consumers. Your study also, the report also shows, the gradual increase of net metering based installations, although the regulations came out in back in 2015, but it has taken 5-6 years till the point if we look at the number of installations, which has already crossed more than 15,000 installations for more than 260 megawatts, more than half of this number has been installed in last 1.5 years. So the awareness has played a major role, and that was the main reason why ADB introduced the certification of the vendors and installers. That the prime focus was objective of these regulations is to provide the consumers with the quality of the systems, and also by certifying these companies, and they would also be doing their own awareness campaigns and promotional activities to promote not only the systems in the country, but also other off-grid applications. Uh, State banks financing has definitely played a great role, but it took some time for the banks to get accustomed to the technical issues and parameters of the solar installations. Yes, the study mentioned that there are 13 banks, although it took some time even after the issuance of the RD finance facility by the state bank for the commercial banks to adopt to facility and provide their products. Uh, Initially, only a couple of banks were there financing these products, but in the last 2 years, we have seen a lot of interest from the commercial banks also. And in the last few months, in last couple of months, we were approached by 2 or 3 new banks who were interested in financing, issuing their financial products under the RE finance facility. But there are some technical concerns. There are concerns related to uh, the, uh, the the capacity of the consumers to pay back, especially talking about this the segment of consumers who want to install small products, and they don't have any financial muscle for the same. Uh, but I think with time, with the initiatives the government is taking, State Bank has been very proactive. Apart from the category 2 of the financing, they also introduced a third category in which the solar vendors and installers are also eligible to take finance and loans from the commercial banks, and for providing their systems to consumers. That's another area in which I think the companies with good financial muscles would be interested and are approaching the commercial banks for availing the financing. Uh, I think the most important segment the factor will remain the awareness amongst the general consumers, uh, for not only for net metering systems, but there are many other applications which for solar such solar systems in the urban areas as well as in the rural areas for village electrification, and that segment the government is also focusing on. Primarily in the past, most of the village electrification projects have had been carried out through government's own financing under the government's budget. But learning from our experiences, we are now trying to involve the private sector in such initiatives. And that's why the policy also talks about mechanisms like mini and micro grids operated by the private sector, in which the private sector would be facilitated through variable gap financing, available through donor agencies, or they can also avail the financing fund as the state bank's financing facility for providing such systems in the off-grid areas as well. We have certain examples in which different donor agencies executed their program with support of ADB. For example, the IFC Lighting Pakistan program is one of the examples in which, instead of giving products as giveaways, it targeted working with manufacturers and distributed providing quality equipment in rural areas of Sindh and certain areas of Balochistan on lease basis, and with the facility that they will have their presence in those areas. So they also provide after sales services to the consumer, so the program and the products are sustainable. Similarly, GIZ and a couple of other agencies have also carried out such deployments on result-based financing, in which instead of financing the whole program, the private sector is provided viability gap funding in order to sustain their operations. And there are other opportunities available as well, and I believe the private sector as well as the commercial banks are also trying to leverage from the financing available and the different platform. For example, the GCF financing is available, and as I know, a couple of banks are approaching the financing to avail funds from the GCF, which would then be channeled for small scale consumer financing in different segments. Although, as Tala also mentioned, that the Opex model is not very much applicable for the small scale installations, although large scale installations, especially in the industrial sector, are being done on Opex model. In fact, a couple of days ago, I learned that a few of the companies have also installed hybrid systems and battery systems with battery backups to the tune of 3 to 4 megawatts in the industry based on the same Opex model, and PPA model is also being exercised in the industry. So it will certainly trickle down to smaller consumers once the banks feel comfortable, and also, as the report mentions, once the criteria and the process for financing is simplified by the banks also. So I think the report also provides some good recommendations and suggestions for the availability of financing, and I'm sure going forward with the initiatives and measures taken by the government and the proactive participation of the private sector, we will certainly see increase in deployment of solar installations in the smallest segment of the consumers as well.
Thank you so much, Rafi Sir. Again, you raised some very valid points. These are the things. It's not all, it's not all dark when it comes. The outlook is quite bright. As you mentioned, over the past 1.5 years, most of the adoption has been happening. Again, there are some stats that have been coming in with regards to solar panel exported into Pakistan as well. Those stats are quite astronomical as well compared to the previous 5 years, if we compare what we have seen over the last year as well. So generally, there is that trend with regards to perhaps consumers and household consumers as well. It does trickle down that we have to, explore alternative form of energy when it comes to, electricity provision, and solar is taking that lead. But then again, there are some challenges that remain with regards to greater deployment of this, accelerating the solve. Again, there are examples of some countries that have done it at a much faster pace, and the regulation is there and the willpower is there. So hopefully we'll continue, talking about this, we'll continue propagating this. Such studies will keep on coming, and The general consumer as well will be more aware of such schemes and will utilize this as well. And hopefully the banks can also streamline their processes so that greater adoption can happen on this front. So thank you so much for joining us, and thank you for your valid points. I would like to move on to our second speaker. We have with us Mr. Zara Khan, who is working as the Assistant Director at State Bank of Pakistan. Mr. Zara works as the Assistant Director in Infrastructure, Housing and SME Finance Department of State Bank. He resides in Green Banking and Infrastructure Finance Division, where he is responsible for implementation of green banking and sustainable finance practices in financial institutions. Mr. Zarok specifically looks after the implementation of SPP's green banking guidelines and SPP's financing scheme for renewable energy. Mr. Zarok is also involved in different development projects to update SPP's policies in line with international best practices relating to green banking. Thank you so much, sir, for joining us today. Again, like the study mentioned, as it was also alluded by Naila as well in her slides as well, there are those very variable collateral designs and other salient features that need to be looked at. So what are those? What are your thoughts on those features, such as financing tenor and equity ratios in context of solar lending by banks? And on a general level, what are some of the plans of State Bank of Pakistan when it comes to continuing the promotion of green investment in Pakistan?
First of all, I would like to thank RDPI for inviting State Bank to be part of the study launch event on rooftop solar potential in Pakistan. Given the importance of renewable energy, SPP appreciates the efforts of RDPI for conducting such an extensive research. I believe studies like this can play a vital role in identifying any hurdles or suggestions for better adoption of the renewable energies in Pakistan. We all are aware of the fact that Pakistan is currently going through dual challenge of climate change and inefficiencies in the energy sector. So to this end, State Bank has been proactively promoting green banking through their indigenous resources like renewable energy. So for this purpose, State Bank has issued Green Bank Renewable Energy Scheme in 2016, which was later on updated in 2019. State Bank has also issued the Islamic version of the scheme in the same year. So the basic objective of the scheme is to promote clean energy projects to meet the growing electricity demand through renewable energy resources, and also to promote use of indigenous resources like solar, wind, hydro, etc. So let me now briefly talk about the key features of the scheme. So basically, financing under this scheme is available for power generation of up to 50 megawatts using renewable energy sources like solar, wind, hydro, etc. The scheme comprises of three categories. So the first category, under the first category, financing of up to 6 billion rupees is available for the borrowers that are desirous of setting up renewable energy power projects for their own use or for selling of electricity to national grid or combination of both. In the second category, the financing is available up to 400 million rupees. In this category, borrowers include small borrowers, that is like domestic, agricultural, commercial, or industrial, who are desirous of installing renewable energy solutions for generation of electricity for their own use or selling of electricity to distribution companies through net metering. And category three, which is relatively new to the other two categories, which was introduced in the latest revision of the scheme in 2019. So in category three, financing of up to 2 billion rupees is available for vendors, suppliers, or energy sale companies that are desirous of installing renewable energy equipment on lease basis, deferred payment sale, rental basis, or selling of electricity to ultimate owners and users. I'm happy to share with you that State Bank has received a great response from the industry since the issuance of the updated scheme. The total outstanding amount under the scheme has increased almost 4 times from last year's outstanding. Now coming to your question regarding variable collateral design in banks, let me mention here that State Bank, in all State Bank refinance schemes, the credit risk of the credit risk is borne by the bank and not State Bank of Pakistan. So therefore, in RE schemes, the RE scheme has specifically mentioned that all the banks shall ensure the due diligence of the borrower as per their own internal credit risk criteria and the risk profile of the borrowing, so that there is no misutilization of the funds under the scheme. The main issue behind the collateral requirements from the banks mainly stems from the absence of the secondary market, which was earlier mentioned in the presentation as well. And I believe once the secondary market is developed, the collateral requirements will be eventually relaxed by the banks. SVP is also aware of this issue, and therefore we introduced this category 3 to support the small borrowers. The rationale behind introducing the category 3 was to facilitate the small borrowers that are collateral deficient and are unable to avail financing under category 2. I believe in the coming years, as the category 3 is relatively new, so in the coming years, small borrowers, that is household and SMEs both, being ultimate owners, users, will immensely benefit from the scheme under category 3. Now, apart from renewable energy scheme, State Bank is also encouraging green practices in the financial institutions through our green banking guidelines, which were issued in 2017. For future plans, State Bank has initiated a project with IFC that is called Pakistan Sustainable Banking Project. So the project comprises of 3 phases. In the first phase, we are developing an implementation tool in line with the State Bank's guidelines, green banking guidelines. In the second, we are planning to create awareness and capacity building of the banking industry. And in the third and last, we are planning to create market capacity of local trainer intermediaries. So currently we are in the first phase, as it has recently started, but we are expecting progress in the coming years. To sum up, I would like to share that Pakistan has a tremendous opportunity to tap in the abundant solar, wind, and hydro resource potential, and the shift to renewables will have multiple benefits, including the lower cost of electricity, improved energy access, and energy independence, with added benefit of greater resilience to the climate change impact on Pakistan. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Hansal. Again, some valid points with regards to, it's good to see, the State Bank is taking an active role in this. Again, the chairman is also quite active on different forums. He's also, talking about the scheme and propagating the scheme. And it becomes all the more important that the patronage is provided to such initiatives by the government segment as well, so that this takes off. And like you mentioned, it's good to know that the State Bank is also aware of some of the challenges that are currently, prevalent in the market with regards to risk management of banks, and the consumer awareness is also missing. So again, it's good to see that the PSPP program is also underway, and hopefully over the coming years, you will see that future, programs such as these and such initiatives and policies will keep on improving, and hopefully we'll see them yield fruit even better in terms of, adoption and utilization of such policies as well. So thank you, sir, for joining us, and thank you for your valuable input. I'd like to move on now to Mr. Asad Mahmood, who is Manager Technical at NICA. Mr. Asad is a mechanical engineer by profession and has been associated with the renewable energy and energy efficiency sector for the last 15 years. He has played a vital role in the approval process of the National Energy Efficiency and Conservation Act 2016. This legislation opened new doors and avenues for promoting, implementing, and achieving energy efficiency and conservation in all sectors of the economy under the legal umbrella. As a trainer/consultant, he has conducted numerous on-site and classroom-based customized and general training on various topics pertaining to energy efficiency, mitigation, and clean technologies across Pakistan and abroad. Pakistan Energy Labeling Scheme and introduction of energy efficient zigzag brake kilns are some of his most recent ongoing projects that he's working on. It's a pleasure to have you here with us, sir. Thank you so much for joining us. So, like mentioned by the previous speakers as well, there is this gap with regards to a general awareness of the public. Training needs need to be assessed, trainings need to be provided, perhaps capacity needs to be built. And NICA has been quite active in its nascent years on those fronts as well. There are talks about improving, perhaps bringing indigenous manufacturing of solar panels to Pakistan. And if that goes through, this might be the breakthrough that the industry requires for greater adoption of solar PV, be it at a domestic level or a commercial level. So what do you think are, some of the ideas that can work on that front? And how is NICA planning on playing a role in greater adoption of solar PV at a domestic level?
Well, as our previous eminent speakers from AETB and SBP have already given you the ground realities and the present baseline where we are standing at the moment. So this as and you have yourself acknowledged the best practices and success stories so far Pakistan has achieved. So so supplementing those, I guess, like there are certain legal tools which under the ambit of energy efficiency can supplement the renewable energy penetration even on a much vaster level. But it all depends at the end of the day how the dots are connected between the NEPRA permissions to the net metering consumers, and we need to be like looking at both sides of the picture, optimistic and pessimistic both. So being a general consumer, people don't want to invest money in which the paybacks are very much higher and things don't return to you and the thing starts malfunctioning at the end of the day. So just like from a general consumer perspective, our aim now should be to see like how the larger base of consumers, which are the single phase consumers, can be connected to this, can avail this net metering facility, which are getting which are getting already like subsidized electricity, and they are getting and this is causing the pressure on the government side. So and that is another part which needs to be addressed in parallel as well while devising a large scale policy regarding single phase metering and things like that. But more than our from the organic growth and AEDB continuous facilitation through legislation, through removal of the duties and the development partners, technical capacity enhancement programs. So it is good to see that we have now professional solar PV customized designers, and the companies are also there which are offering standardized solutions as per the customized needs. But it's not the case everywhere at the moment so far. Because many of the importers, for them, they haven't, and they if their standards are being overlooked, so it's becoming a heaven. So those areas are becoming heaven for them, where there is no compliance checking or conformity assessment checkings. So and in the but it is serving the purpose of the communities in far-flung areas, off-grid areas, and things like that. So it's a common, solar PV seems to be now a very common thing in even the off-grid areas where and even mostly in our domestic rural areas where dense population is there. Still solar is not there on the roofs as much as you can see on the huts when you start traveling off the roads and off-grid areas. So that's itself is a good success story. But all these panels import, and I think the traceability elements have to be optimized, because all this is going to become a chunk after a certain time period. So the life cycle analysis and environmental consequences of this after their useful life is over. So we need to address these from this time onwards as well, because leaving this important segment may also cause damage at the end of the day in terms of e-waste and things like that. So nevertheless, like from NICA perspective, the building energy code is something which is going to open the doors for domestic consumers and commercial consumers, where if with the consultation we would like to see that once like we are trying to call up the committee meetings with the new Pakistan Union Council management, because they are the custodian of the building codes, and then therein there is the energy code. So we'll see like where we can, what target we can give to the new buildings which are going to be constructed, high rise buildings or domestic buildings. What percentage of that should be from the solar or any renewable energy technology? So the blend, like as we say that there should be a blend of technologies. So far we have wind and solar taking the lead over here. So we also need to address other RETs as well in parallel, which are also becoming very common in use, just like hydrogen fuel cell technology and and other solar thermal technologies as well, which can supplement the gas shortage. So this is something like where we need to also like divert our focus, but nevertheless, as our topic is related to solar, one thing which we kept on overlooking during the design, we just kept focusing on the angle at the tilt in which you get the maximum insolation radiation. But in most of the countries, people also look at the structural integrity and structural health issues. So they have given the optimum wind directions as well, that in which in this wind direction you have to install your panel, because it will not pose a risk to your structure on which it is going to be mounted or things like that. But they are mostly wind is not the so far deciding factor in Pakistan in terms of domestic installations, or like it is only like a structural element or optimum, getting the optimum solar irradiation. That is the ultimate objective. So I'll cut short over here and give the floor to you.
Thank you so much, Asad Saab. And again, some very valid points you raised with regards to monitoring the sector as well. We need more stats, even as researchers. There is this gap with regards to reporting of solar PV installations. How do we mainstream this? How do we incorporate household installations within our planning documents as well? And how do we plan for this as well? Be it off grid, be it household. These are things that need to be discussed at a policy level as well, and these are things that perhaps the regulator might also need to look into, so that the general prevalence of this can also be accelerated, and the data is also there for accelerating this growth as well. So thank you for pointing that out. And you also mentioned the issue about single phase net metering, that I believe is also quite important, given how a lot of our consumers are based on single phases. And again, this is a great market for future installations of household RE as well. So thank you for pointing that out as well. Thank you for your interventions. I would like to now move on to our final panelist, which is Mr. Musa Khan Durrani. Mr. Musa Khan Durrani, CFA, is an investment professional with over 13 years of progressive and diversified work experience in business assurance, credit ratings, business development, investment advisory, and project execution. He's currently heading the buy-side investment function at SAF Group, one of the country's leading industrial and services conglomerates, having business interests in textile, power generation, energy exploration, telecom, healthcare, IT, and environmental management. He's also heading strategic alliances at Sky Electric Private Limited, prominent solar rooftop company in Pakistan as well. Musa Durrani Saab has been a regular contributor to various newspapers and has participated in different talk shows on Pakistan's energy crisis. He has been a strong proponent of renewables, especially distributed solar. He completed his MBA from Rush Business School in 2006 and is a CFA charter holder since 2012. Thank you so much, Musa Durrani Saab, for joining us. Again, I've read some of your media pieces as well, and we also mentioned that some of the other schemes initiated by the government, such as the Kamyab Jawan scheme, such as the Naya Pakistan housing scheme, those have taken off, fantastically well, and perhaps the large-scale adoption of SPV, RE Finance 6 scheme, the way those schemes worked remains missing. So again, there's a lot of these issues were highlighted by different panelists. Some attributed it, to consumer knowledge and consumer awareness. Some attributed it to risk management. Some attributed it to, the lack of verification and monitoring and the availability of data. So in light of the results of the study and your own opinion, as Naila also mentioned, that Opex systems vacuum also exists, and that is a big market for any potential investor. There is that risk associated with it, but again, the market still remains over there. So, how do you think these challenges can be overcome, and how do you think this adoption can be accelerated in terms of these particular aspects with regards to Opex, and then perhaps can we talk about risk management externally and not through banks for smaller consumers? Could we talk about some conflict resolution mechanisms when it comes to Opex models for, say, off-grid electrification in rural areas? So yeah, over to you, sir. I guess, did we just lose Lisa? I guess Rani Saab is just reconnecting. If you could just give it a minute or so. I guess in the meanwhile, while Musa Durrani Saab reconnects, we can open the floor to a quick question if somebody has anything. Mansoor Samra Saab, you're unmuted. You can go ahead with your question. I guess Durrani Saab is back online. So over to you, Durrani Saab, with the question.
Thank you, Mustafa. Thank you, Ms. Naila, colleagues from RDPI, fellow panelists and participants. Apologies beforehand. I think I'm having some bad luck with the internet here. So if I may get disconnected, I'll try to rejoin, but let's hope it stays connected. Quickly, as all the worthy panelists rightly mentioned, the solar rooftop space is one which is growing very fast. There's, of course, great demand for various reasons. One, of course, the supportive policies of the government, and on the other side, international solar components, system components, the prices are going down. They're on a learning curve. Similarly, it's not a great problem. It's not a great thing to have, but our local grid tariffs are increasing, which makes solar, which is making solar more and more viable. But talking specifically about rooftop solar, I think there are two perspectives there. One, that the current adoption, as of in terms of the current status, I think it's still very low as compared to the total market size. But the positive side is that it's growing very rapidly, almost blitz scaling. And the other part of the argument is that the solar financing has quite kind of lagged this solar adoption. And we have a couple of stats from the government. So per AEDB website, there are about 16 to 17,000 net metering connections, which are either in process by DISCO or been approved by NEPRA. And per State Bank data, as of 30th June, there were about 450 applications which were refinanced by State Bank. So that shows that only 1 to 2% of the total number of grid tied or grid connected connections have been financed. The other number, which kind of again corroborates this, is the total solar PV imports, which in the last 10 years have been about 3,500 megawatts in Pakistan last 10 years. These are again rough estimates. We don't have actual numbers, and the amount and the capacity which has been financed by State Bank is about 60 megawatts. So 60 megawatts versus 3,500 megawatts. Of course, not all of which is financeable, but still it tends to show you the kind of small minuscule size which currently is under finance. So I think the State Bank facility, financing facility itself is very attractive from the vendor and the customer point of view. I believe 4% spread is also decent for interested banks to work on. The problem lately has been, as you mentioned and highlighted, has been the disalignment of incentive structures among various state bank schemes. So, for instance, there's Naya Pakistan Housing Financing Scheme, and in our experience in dealing with most of the banks, or at least the banks which are large scale, they are currently using their home mortgage team for solar finance, because it of course makes a natural fit. And since the incentive structures is right now geared towards the housing finance, whether in terms of penalties, incentives, commissions, regular follow-ups, the solar scheme is suffering, and this is essentially being cannibalized. So of course, alignment of structure, incentive structure needs to be there. Then some documentation. Banks frequently complain of heavy documentation that can be streamlined to better to improve the offtake of solar financing. And I think banks are also kind of genuine in their concern regarding the credit risk associated with rooftop solar, especially for domestic and residential customers. I think an introduction of credit guarantee or credit enhancement or credit insurance scheme would greatly help, and it would help because that would make banks more comfortable with residential customers. And this credit guarantee can be privately priced by third-party organizations. We're not asking for the government to do this. You can have agencies, private agencies, which can charge 2, 3, 4% premium on top of it. And any customer who is able to get solar financed at, let's say, if not 6%, maybe at 9%, he'd happily do that as long as it's not too high or comparable to auto finance. So I think that's another area where intervention can be made. Now, talking about the Opex model in residential, in most of the developed countries where solar has really kind of progressed and the uptake has been strong, it's almost always has been led by Opex model. Which is, in other words, the energy sale or the PPA model. In Pakistan, I think you're right. Most of the EPCs or solar companies are not interested in doing this for reasons.
Yeah, I guess we just lost Durrani Saab again. I guess we just lost Ronnie Saab again. He's having some issues with his connection. If and when he comes back, we'll give the floor back to him. I see that there is a question from Mansoor Sumro where he mentions how AEDB, SPP, and NICA are taking efforts for solar PV manufacturing in Pakistan. Again, a very important question. If anyone from the panel would like to, take that question with regards to local manufacturing of solar PVs in Pakistan. Ji Jafi sir, please go ahead.
Ji Mustafa. Well, the government has been trying to promote and bring foreign investors and local foreign OEMs to put up their facilities in Pakistan for manufacturing of panels. But it is linked with the targets of the government and the future market in Pakistan. That was the missing link so far, because whichever OEM we talk to, they would require a firm commitment by the government that how much solar do you want to induct. What we've seen in, for example, our neighbors in India and other countries, that with firm government commitments of, let's say, 100 gigawatts or 150 gigawatts or even lesser quantums, but there has to be a certain committed quantum that the government would intake for large scale project as well, and there should be clarity on regulatory framework and policies for the small scale applications, which would attract the OEMs and the local investors to collaborate with the OEMs putting up their manufacturing facilities. That was missing, although the new policy does mention the targets for the future for 2030, and so coupled with the IGSEP that has recently been approved by NEPTA, that provides for 7,000 megawatts of solar production by 2030 for the large grid scales component. I think that would be a driving force in attracting the investment. Although, as we know, there are many private sector organized companies and investors who are negotiating with the first tier companies globally to for technology transfer or partnership with them for setting up local manufacturing in Pakistan. And the government is open for any sort of incentives they would require for that, if they feel that level playing field is not being provided, or if there's certain other additional incentives are. We are open for their suggestions, and we would certainly look into it. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Jafi, for taking the question. Rani Saab, I see you're back online. If you would like to go ahead and finish on your thoughts.
Yes, sorry. So I was talking about the discos and the incentive structure. Again, there is not really great because they are losing their great, higher paying customers. So in order to, make them, push and adopt net metering more, more quickly, I would suggest they should be incentivized in terms of processing these net metering applications more quickly. Targets could be given, and this would make them, improve their efficiency and invest resources in this domain. The second thing on the Opex model would be involving DISCOs as revenue assurance agents. So you can have three agencies essentially. One would be the solar EPC, who would go and install the system. Then there will be a third party, which would be the financer, could be the banks or the solar PPA companies who would finance and own the structure, own the system for the next 10, 15 years. And then, of course, the third element would be revenue assurance through DISCOs, which would collect the bill and would be able to disconnect if the customer defaults on his payment. So this is the kind of, ecosystem we would require to really, jumpstart Opex model in residential customers. And of course, this would require some regulatory changes as well. As one of the panelists mentioned, the existing regulatory regime is not conducive to PPAs for residential customers. And let's hope that this is part of their agenda and this gets followed up soon. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Dharani sir, for your points. Again, I totally agree with your suggestion that perhaps discos might have to, take the lead in Opex models as well as it is is quite prevalent in other economies of similar scale as well, where discos kind of play a leading role. And I believe once discos are privatized, we might see that take going up as well, and hopefully this Opex model can also be accelerated through this. So thank you for those suggestions as well. I'd like to now open the floor for questions and answers. We still have a couple of panelists here, and I believe we also have some questions in the Q&A box as well. So let me take it one by one. So there's this question from Mohammed Saeed that I would like one of the panelists, or perhaps Naila, can take this as well. PV panels are one part of the solar PV system. What about the manufacturing of other equipment like inverters and support structures, and how can that be promoted in Pakistan? Ranisa, would you like to answer that? Or Naila, if you would like to take that?
Mustafa, I think it has been posed to someone from, I think, ADB or Nika could probably answer.
Yeah, perhaps Nika would have been best suited to answer this, or ADB as well. Do we have Jafri sir?
Yes, Mustafa, I think
Sure.
When we talk about manufacturing, we are not only specifying manufacturing of solar panels in Pakistan. It includes all sort of components and accessories, be it the structure, the frames, the inverters, charge controllers, even small components, cables. It includes everything. So whatever component can be locally manufactured, we are certainly trying to attract investors, local and foreign as well, to come and invest and produce them locally. And whatever incentives they required, we would certainly love to look into it. And as far as inverters are concerned, I believe there are many few companies in Pakistan who are already um, producing manufacturing these inverters. So I think the technology already exists. Initially, these were the ones who were selling UPS systems in Pakistan, and now they are selling in solar inverters as well, locally manufactured ones. So I think that this industry already exists, and it's a matter of providing quality equipment, certified quality equipment to the consumers. So that is one area in which we are also propagating that whatever equipment is produced in Pakistan, even if it's solar panels or the other equipment, it should be certified through local agencies and nationally accredited agencies as per international standards. Only then we can have consumers to buy such locally manufactured products.
Sure. Thank you so much, Officer, for taking that. We also have one question from Samina Naz. Again, it's a valid argument as well that she's asking basically, can you please let us know how many households are currently using rooftop solar and how to enhance the awareness of rooftop solar in line with the fact that CPP is always opposing rooftop net metering, calling it the spiral. So there's this opinion as well that since Pakistan is at producing more electricity right now, we are producing more. So moving to net metering and moving to rooftop solars will kind of affect the performance of the grid and will lead to further disintegration at the national level, or perhaps the structured grid level. So there is this argument as well that kind of plays at the mentality of the consumer as well, and perhaps at the governmental level as well when designing policies. So Durrani Saf, if you have any comments on this, I don't want to send all the questions to Jafri Saf.
Yeah, so I think again, as we were discussing, it doesn't suit the discos as yet, but I think in all honesty, I think there's some sort of myopism on the end of the government agencies to think that solar rooftop is becoming a threat, especially in view of the duck curve, which is supposed to scare off these solar EPCs. You see, we don't have, unfortunately, the breakup in terms of how many residential and commercial connections are grid connected. But even if we take the whole, which I mentioned is 17,000 connections, they are total about 300 megawatts. So only 300 megawatt out of 3,500 megawatt is connected with the grid, and this is the total number which could be a cause of concern to the power grid managers. And if you look at this 300 in perspective of 24,000 megawatt, it's minuscule, right? There's absolutely no reason to fear for the technical reasons. Yes, why these connections are getting off grid, we all know why, because no country in the world can afford to have its grid tariffs increased by 20% every year on year. So you frankly can't blame them. But talking specifically and purely from technical point of view, it's still a very, very low number, less than 1%. And yes, the awareness and the advocacy needs to be done more on the government front rather than the consumers here.
Sure, thank you so much. I guess we are up with time. It's already 2:17 and we're supposed to finish at 2:15. So thank you so much, everyone. On behalf of RDPI, on behalf of Naila and the team, I would like to thank everyone present here today, all the participants, all the panelists for your valuable contributions to the discourse as well. And thank you, Naila, for the study as well. As for the participants, again, we have had some questions with regards to, the study. This will be shared, the study, the summary, and I guess a media statement as well has also been prepared by the team, which will be shared with everyone. All of the participants will get an email from RDPI pretty soon. So thank you so much for joining us, everyone, and yeah, have a good rest of the day. Thank you.
Thank you, Mustafa. Thank you. चलें, ठीक है मुस्तफ़ा साहब, आपका शुक्रिया। ये
ठीक है सर, शुक्रिया आपका।
जी।